I'd like to call the Wednesday, August 14th Planning Commission hearing to order. Michelle, will you call the roll?
Mr. Granger.
Here.
Mr. Boswell.
Here.
Mr. Klee. Ms. Macbeth.
Here.
Mr. Edwards.
Here.
Mr. Schaller.
Here.
Mr. Rogers.
Here.
We have not had a hearing since May, and so we have 5 different meetings and comp plan work session minutes to approve. Are there any corrections that you found? Okay, so the first order of business that we have is the approval of minutes for the past 5 meetings that we have had, since we did not have a public hearing in either June or July. So of the 5 minutes in front of us, there are no corrections or changes, so if someone would move the approval of the minutes.
I'll move to approve the minutes of our May 15 meeting and the May 22, June 26, July 17, and July 24 work sessions.
Second that motion.
Thank you, Michelle.
Mr. Granger.
Aye.
Mr. Boswell.
Aye.
Ms. Macbeth.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye, but I abstain from July 17.
Mr. Schaller.
Aye.
Mr. Rogers.
Aye.
Okay, there are no consent agenda items. We do have 4 items under public hearings. The first, PCR 19-012, an ordinance amendment regarding food trucks versus mobile food delivery devices.
Yes, Madam Chair and members of the Commission. At its 2019 Virginia General Assembly session, they enacted Senate Bill 1425, which requires updating the zoning ordinance to meet the requirements of the bill. And the bill defines a mobile food unit and provides for an exemption for mobile food units in that the owner pays B-poll tax only in the jurisdiction where the vehicle is registered for the first 2 years, but not in any other in which it may operate. The bill also allows the city to require the owner of a mobile food unit to register without paying B-poll the mobile food unit if it operates in the city, even though it's not garaged in the city. Based on this bill, we need to make several changes to the zoning ordinance. The first is removing the food truck definition from Article 1, Section 21.2, and then, of course, adding the mobile food unit definitions to that same section, removing food trucks in the district regulations in the LB1, B1, B3, ED, and ED2 districts, and with a special use permit in the MS district of the zoning ordinance, and then adding the mobile food unit to those same sections, which is LB1, B1, B3, ED, ED2, and with a special use permit in the MS district. The ordinance also amends the Supplemental District Regulations to reflect the change from mobile food trucks to mobile food units, providing an exemption for the mobile food units and minor changes to the text to clarify the change from food truck to mobile food unit. City Council in July amended Chapter 18 to create a separate B-poll classification for mobile food units and an exemption to provide as provided in Senate Bill 1425. Therefore, staff recommends that Planning Commission recommend to City Council adoption of the proposed ordinance to bring the city's regulations in compliance with Senate Bill 1425. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Sure. So, Carolyn, just to clarify, in reading through this, it really looked like there was a lot of just editing kinds of behaviors here, and that I guess especially important for me is that the additional regulations that we have with regarding, a special use permit or the inspection by the fire department and things, all those things stand that we've worked on separately.
All those things stay the same. Basically, what it did is change the definition from a mobile food truck to a mobile food unit, and changing all that text in the guidelines, and also doing the B-poll tax. And basically, it's the same ordinance and updating it to meet that Senate Bill 1425. Yeah. So both sections of the city code relate to each other.
That's what I thought. Are there other clarifications for Carolyn? Thank you. Okay, thank you. Okay, this is a public hearing, so at this point I will open the public hearing. If anyone wants to come forward and speak on the difference between food trucks and mobile food units.
Don't rush.
Okay, lots of people, but no one seems to want to talk on that subject, so I will close the public hearing. Are there any questions or comments from the commission? Someone move to,
I move to approve PCR -19-012.
second?
Mr. Granger,
Aye.
Mr. Boswell,
Aye.
Ms. Macbeth,
Aye.
Mr. Edwards,
Aye.
Mr. Schaller,
Aye.
Mr. Rogers.
Aye.
Okay, so this brings us to our second public hearing, but second public hearing that deals with three different items, PCR 19-13, 14, and 15. One, a redefinition to allow for private plazas, then a special use permit to remove parking, and then finally, a special use permit for the construction of the private plaza. I believe that we will see one combined presentation, and then.
If that's okay with the commission?
Yes, and then general discussions, but then I think when we eventually get to moving and voting on the different pieces, I think we should take those things in order
Okay.
of the complexity here. Okay, thanks.
Okay. Madam Chair and members of the commission, this is a request of the Colonial Williamsburg Foundation to create a new private plaza on the site of the existing P3 parking lot in Merchant Square, which involves the three cases as shown on the slide above. PCR 1913 adds private plaza to the zoning ordinance, a definition for that. Number 14 is a special use permit to remove 40 parking spaces from the P3 parking lot. And 15 is a SUP for the conversion from the parking lot to a private plaza. For PCR 13, this request is to add a private plaza definition to the zoning ordinance and to allow a private plaza with a special use permit in the downtown business district B1. And on the screen is the definition, the proposed definition that staff's come up for private plaza. Basically, it means a multi-purpose area that allows flexibility of space within its boundaries to include planned and passive activities such as festivals, art events, outdoor movies, stage musical or theatrical entertainment, which may also include fountains, benches, temporary installations, including temporary stages, lighting and sound equipment, recreational facilities, outdoor furniture, and seating areas and outdoor seating for restaurants and other eating establishments that surround the plaza. PCR 19-14 is the second request for the special use permit to remove 40 parking spaces from the P3 parking lot for the construction of the plaza. And this overhead shows where the P3 parking lot is, and 40 spaces are the interior there, and we'll see it further in my presentation, specifically what it looks like. In 2016, the city hired Walker Parking Consultants to perform a parking study of the downtown parking district. The parking study notes that 4,326 parking spaces are located in the downtown parking district. 87% of those spaces are provided off-street. Of the 87% of the off-street spaces, 56% are on private lots. The spaces in higher demand are the 13% on street parking spaces. The study did counts in March and also in July. During peak weekday conditions, 1,656 spaces were vacant in the study areas. On-street spaces were almost full even before shops opened. Weekend parking occupancy, they note, is lower than the weekday levels. Reviewing future demand, it was projected that parking occupancy would increase from approximately 62% to 75%, which still left over 1,000 parking vacancies. They determined overall that there is adequate parking downtown with hot spots around Merchant Square and Richmond Road. They note that the demand is higher during weekdays than on weekends, and that more than 1,600 vacant parking spaces exist during peak times. The study notes that there are sufficient spaces in the district, but there is a perception of limited parking in the district. The study cites that this is due to customers wanting to park at or close to the business they want to visit, and that short-term spaces are often being used by long-term users. Based on the parking study, the loss of 40 parking spaces in the P3 parking lot can be accommodated without detriment to the overall parking downtown, because approximately over 900 parking spaces are available in nearby parking lots. And this is an overhead that basically shows the nearby parking lots, P1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and the associated number of spaces. The removal of these spaces can be absorbed by the adjacent lots such as the Prince George Parking Garage or P6. Despite the common perception, overall the city has ample parking with a variety of parking options downtown within walking distance. The third request, 19-15, is for a special use permit to construct a private plaza as shown on the conceptual elevations and site plan which are attached in the P3 parking lot. And this is the conceptual site plan. So basically you see that there's green space, and the E part in the middle of it is sort of like a splash pad. They call it something different on the drawing up there. What I wanted to highlight also was the H with the yellow around it. That is the public restrooms that will be constructed on the site. And as you can see down at the bottom in the G, that's where the majority of the parking spaces that will remain will be there. You'll see a hatched area that is a drop-off 10-minute parking area, and then you see along there the handicap parking spaces. There's also one to the left behind Schuster's and another one over there behind the Goodwin building. The applicant notes in their application that a new downtown pedestrian-friendly entertainment and event space will curate a consistent schedule, and regular experimental and cultural and opportunities will invite increasing numbers of local, regional, and visiting audiences to shop, dine, linger, and explore all of downtown Williamsburg. They note their objective is to enhance an already vibrant, multi-use driven, flourishing Williamsburg town center that is ever-growing magnet for residents and visitors to enjoy. The applicant proposes such uses as art events, outdoor movies, staged musical or theatrical entertainment, and dining. Installations within the plaza may include water features, outdoor furniture, a temporary video screen, and expansion of outdoor restaurant seating. The 2013 comp plan designates these parcels as downtown commercial, which in the land use category is intended to promote a variety of business uses in the downtown planning area and includes Merchant Square and other predominantly retail areas adjacent to the Colonial Williamsburg historic area and the College of William and Mary. As I noted previously, it's currently zoned Downtown Business District, which reads, "This district is established to promote harmonious development and redevelopment in the downtown business areas adjacent to the Colonial Williamsburg District and the College of William and Mary." This site is located in an archaeological protection district. An archaeological evaluation report was prepared, and a copy of the report was copied in my memo. The report states a review of the documentary and archaeological evidence relating to historical development of Block 23 indicates that the lot's 18th and 19th century development was predominantly along Duke of Gloucester and Prince George Streets, and for the most part is outside the Goodwin development area. It goes on to note that the development plans for Goodwin Square include a very limited excavation and will require extensive land filling to raise the grade as much as 3 feet within the center of the development area to meet elevations along the area's perimeter. Therefore, any resources within this area will be protected. To protect any resources from being destroyed, it recommends that the Colonial Williamsburg Department of Archaeology monitor any demolition and record the locations of any archaeological features that are exposed prior to construction of the plaza. The Architecture Review Board reviewed and conceptually approved the design at their June 25th meeting, and I attached a copy of their minutes in your packet. The Site Plan Review Committee reviewed the request at their July meeting, and committee members were in favor of the conversion and expressed concerns with signage for parking located off North Boundary Street. The applicant took that in mind and and stated to the review board that they would develop a sign packet for approval with the final site plan if a special use permit is approved. As stated previously, the applicant proposes to construct a private park in the middle of the block. The downtown vibrancy study cites the existing mix of land uses in the downtown core presents a further barrier to vibrancy. A need is cited for public open spaces that residents, students, and visitors can feel free to visit and relax. Similar areas of green spaces or plazas are necessary to ensure the downtown area is cohesively connected and people have access to a variety of open space amenities. The study also recommends several green spaces downtown. One of the green spaces recommended was converting P3 parking lot into a premier plaza with such amenities as a fountain and gathering area for performance space. Dumpster locations are proposed behind Schuster's, which is this area, and behind the trellis. The conceptual plans provide fire access for the ladder trucks, which have been reviewed and approved by the fire department. This is a rendering of what the splash pad, I call it, would look like, the conceptual design. I think some individuals have gotten it confused with a fountain. It is not a fountain. And I had the applicant provided these images, which shows what it would look like when the water's turned off, and it'll become part of the walking area for other times of the year when the fountain, where the splash pad's not needed, when it's not hot enough for kids to run through. The proposed project is in harmony with the adopted comp plan and the intent and purpose of the zoning ordinance. The proposed use of a private plaza is in harmony with the character of the adjacent properties and will not result in the destruction, loss, or damage of any feature determined to be of significant ecological, scenic, or historic importance. This project is designed and sited so that it will not hinder or discourage the appropriate development or use of adjacent properties. Therefore, staff recommends approval of the text change to define a private plaza and to add private plaza with a special use permit as outlined in the proposed ordinance. This gives the city the flexibility to evaluate each site and determine if a proposed plaza should be allowed at a specific location. For PCR 19-14, staff recommends approval of the special use permit request to remove 40 parking spaces from P3 as shown on the conceptual site plan. For PCR 1915, staff recommends approval of the special use permit for the construction of a private plaza in the P3 parking lot as shown on the conceptual site plan, subject to the 5 conditions as outlined in my memo. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have. Jeff Duncan is also here with the Colonial Williamsburg Foundation if you have any questions of him.
Yes, Carolyn, I'd clarify that the Colonial Williamsburg Foundation owns that parking lot?
That's correct.
And should they decide against the Goodwin Plaza project, could they legally charge for people to use that parking lot?
They would have to get out of the license agreement with the city. I believe it's a 30-day notice to the city, and then they could charge for the parking lot.
Okay. Was lighting addressed in the site plan, or will they be taken up by the ARB and
Lighting
site plan later?
There's some lighting grade level inside of it. I think the more detailed lighting plan will be part of the formal application if the special use permit is approved. And not only Architectural Review Board would get a look at that, but Planning Commission also would get to approve the plaza also as part of a site plan approval. So this is just a conceptual approval.
Thank you.
Questions for Carol?
The definition of private plaza, is that something that you all created, or is that from the code, or is that?
That was
what's
something the city attorney and I sat down and discussed and tried to come up with a definition that gave some flexibility, but also a limit where it could be, and that's one of the reasons we made it a special use permit, because we didn't want all downtown to go to a private plaza. So we looked at at making that a special use permit requirement, and we looked at the definition and looked at the uses that the applicant proposed and came up with that definition.
So we're safe, I mean, it's not specifically authorized, it's not a specifically authorized category, but we're comfortable with that.
Well, it has to
They
be
would create it.
defined, but it's only
We have
allowed
the
with a
authority.
special use permit. So before anyone can convert anything to a private plaza, they would need to come back to Planning Commission and City Council.
So as far as the definition itself that you created, that the legislature says that's,
Yes.
we're okay with that, assembly, okay, thank you.
Carolyn, would you mind explaining what the signage might look like for a visitor or resident driving along North Boundary Street as they consider possibly turning into the plaza to see if there's
Right.
an open space?
That was part of the concern at the Site Plan Review Committee and staff. So we came up with, we think there would be a sign at the entrance, which is down here by the I where the dumpster is,
Right.
that will say that there's limited parking there and what those parking will be. Most all of those spaces are ADA accessible parking spaces, except for the drop-off space, which can be 10 or 15 minutes or 5 minutes. So they'll work through that, and they'll become part of the site plan process when we get a formal site plan, if the application is approved by City Council.
Okay.
Are there any other splash pads that are being considered in the area? I've heard talk of maybe one going in near the library, and so I just wonder if there are any that are queued up to come.
Not to my knowledge. What we have at the library is the fountain that sort of spurts water on the ground and outside of the fountain at some time. I mean, there may be plans for something like that in the future, but right now, I think this is the only location that I know of formally that's come forth in the city for a splash pad.
And maybe finally here, so we saw the supermajority of this proposal 9 months ago or so, something like that.
That's correct.
And at that time, and through all the different subcommittees and public hearings and all that, we did gather a list of modifications or whatever that we wanted to see. I see some of them still as bullet points in your recommendation, and I think others have been actually folded into the proposal itself by the applicant. So
Right.
I guess, is there anything from that cycle that has been dropped off that we should be mindful of?
The major change that was dropped off from that cycle was the video wall.
Well, that was something that
So
we
that's no
were
longer proposed.
part of that, yes.
So those conditions with that came out of it. But basically, the other conditions are similar to the ones that we did 9 months ago. One I did note is I did not put a time limit this time on the number of days that a temporary event, like the temporary video screen can be up. If the commission wants to do that, you limit it last time to 15 days. 15 days times 3 is 45, and I thought that was a little limiting, especially if you wanted to do not only the movies, but some other type event there. So that's the major change that I made from the previous application.
Okay.
So Carolyn, there are no restrictions on what temporary means right now in the text?
We limit a special event to 3 days or less. And
But
that's,
there could be one every week, is what you're saying,
Yes.
as it current. And so with the 3 days, this is actually a question. So 3 days, it has to come down, and assumably it has to come down for more than an hour before it goes back up and starts another 3 days.
it would have-
You know?
right, it has to be something reasonable.
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
And the reason it was hard for staff to monitor when it goes up and down too. So if it's something the commission wants to limit the number of times that the movie screen can go up, that's something you could add to the conditions if you feel that's necessary.
Okay, so just before we move to opening up the public hearing, any final things, or go for it? Okay. Okay, so then I will open the public hearing, and I have a stack of speaker cards, and I'll go through those in due course, and then we'll open it up. But before we get to either of them, does the applicant wish to come forward and speak? If you'd like to come forward now, I think that'd be great, and then if there are questions at the end, we can have you come back, I guess. Everyone,
Good afternoon, members of the Planning Commission. Thank you for providing this opportunity for public comment about the proposed Goodwin Square development in Merchant Square. And I must also thank Carolyn Murphy and many other city staff for their guidance and recommendations as we developed and designed Goodwin Square. With me all...
I'm sorry. Yes, please.
My name is Jeff Duncan, Vice President of Real Estate for Colonial Williamsburg. With me also today are representatives from firms who have assisted with our design, from Steam & Peace Architecture, professionals from VHB, and our contractor, David Nice Builders. Our application provides for conversion to a pedestrian-friendly plaza of the downtown parking lot P3 owned by Colonial Williamsburg. Colonial Williamsburg would continue to be the owner of the parcels once converted. The project as planned will require about 4 to 5 months for completion, after which the square will contain 8 ADA-compliant parking spaces, an increase from 4 spaces today. 4 additional spaces are located in parking lot P2 behind the bookstore. A new loading zone will be created near the southwest corner of the square, which will also be used for 10 to 15-minute short-term parking for customer pickup and delivery. I reviewed the overall development with you last fall, after which we delayed our plans in order to provide further review by the city and to provide Colonial Williamsburg with an opportunity to work through the application process for funding of the project through the Tourism Development Fund. That application process also allowed time for review of the project by the Tourism Development Fund Committee appointed by the city to oversee use of those funds for important infrastructure and placemaking projects, of which Goodwin Square is, we believe, the most viable of several other projects that were submitted. The past several months also allowed further review of our plans for Goodwin Square as we considered the locations for accessible parking, trash removal, short-term parking, and loading zones. We have also explored options for relocation of the Ice Rink to Goodwin Square from Duke of Gloucester Street, where it has operated for the past 4 years. Other than options for relocation of the Ice Rink to Goodwin Square, the other slight changes to last year's plans are indicated within the package provided with our application. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have of me.
I'm good.
Can you tell us what you determined about the ice rink?
There we go. Carolyn has put this rendering up. The red square is the size of the ice rink as we had it on Duke of Gloucester Street for the last 4 years, 48 feet wide by 84 feet long. We can extend that to 100 feet long or 125 feet long with the company that provides the rink to us. And we have a small opportunity to go a little bit wider as well, but it fits nicely into the center of Goodwin Square. What we're looking at right now is where we would install the infrastructure to support the ice rink and where all that would go.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I will go to my speaker cards if people can come forward and state their name and address. The first one is Amy Quark.
Good afternoon. My name is Amy Quirk. I live at 502 Newport Avenue. I've lived in Williamsburg for 10 years. I have 2 children, 6 and 4, and we are really happy to have made Williamsburg our home. And I'm also extremely excited about how many families we've seen moving downtown into the city. I think it's, we start counting up the number of kids that live, in a few block radius of us. It's growing and growing, and we're very excited about that. And I think that the plan for the Goodwin Plaza is a fantastic way to make the downtown area even more vibrant and family-friendly. We see this as a place where families can come, they can go to Colonial Williamsburg, they can go to the library, and we can keep people downtown. This is a place where kids are going to have fun playing, I think, all year round, especially with the ice rink. Very excited about that plan. And it's also going to draw a lot of families from across the county. I used to live in the county. I moved down to the city, and this is such a center. We want to come down here and be in the downtown, and this is another way in which we can do that and to kind of enjoy downtown Williamsburg. This is also going to be fantastic for tourists. I frequently take my kids to Colonial Williamsburg, and it's fun, and we stomp in the brickyard and all of that. But you know, sometimes we're hot and we're tired after it. Kids have little legs, and so we go home. But I think tourists like us would head over to Goodwin Plaza and like maybe get lunch or get ice cream and cool off in the splash pad. So I think in terms of keeping tourists downtown to frequent the local businesses and all of that, this is a really fantastic plan. So I think it's, you know, it's a win-win situation. It's good for the local businesses, it's good for our tourist economy, and it's good for local residents and for families. I just also wanted to thank the city for a really compelling presentation that I think demonstrated the plethora of parking that's available in the downtown area, and I'm really pleased to see, of course, that there are many accessible parking spots that will still be left in Goodwin Plaza. And I also think that reminding us of some of the recommendations of the consultants that the city hired is really important, and how they urged us to add more green space in the downtown area. And I think that that's really important in terms of creating a vibrant downtown and a quality of life for our residents. I think CW's plans to offer art, theater, and other entertainment options in the plaza is going to really make Goodwin Plaza, you know, a year-round space that we're going to enjoy. That's going to, you know, enrich the lives of city residents, but also it's going to make Williamsburg known as a tourist destination, not just because of the phenomenal history that we have here in the Historic Triangle, but also that we are a culinary and arts destination. You know, a real kind of full-service tourist center. So I have a hard time thinking of an angle where this isn't, you know, just a no-brainer. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Annika Criddle.
Hello, I'm Annika Criddle, and I live at 4083 Ambassador Circle, so I'm in the county. But I'm a mother of 5 children, ages 18 to 4, and we moved here about 6 years ago, and we love being here in Williamsburg. And when we moved from New York City, or from New York, and we'd lived in New York City before that, there were splash pads at almost every park within about a mile of wherever you live. And that was such a draw in the summers, and I just feel like when I have family who visits from all over the country, they would look for something like that. They're not used to the heat and the humidity, and the thought of having a splash pad in the central location is so delightful, really, as I feel like a real need that needs to be filled. We've loved the ice skating rink in the winter, so thinking of having that move to the plaza sounds like a lovely idea. I mean, I would even suggest adding another splash pad where that was. I do like the quick drop-off idea. I feel like that is a really thoughtful way to approach it, and the ADA accessible parking. So mostly I just want to show my support. I feel like this is a really wonderful plan and really well needed, and I am excited for the possible changes. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Stacey Kern.
Hi, Stacey Kern, 513 Newport Avenue. I'm here to speak in support of the proposal. I live downtown with my husband and my young child. We've lived downtown for 10 years, and the prospect of this common space is exciting and very welcome. We talked about, you've heard before, you know, and we've heard a lot from our city leaders as well, wanting to attract more young families to the downtown area as residents and as visitors, and creating spaces like this is frankly exactly how to do it. Many people will come down here, both tourists and locals alike. I'm really, really happy to see that this proposal removes the rather garish permanent screen that was proposed last time. And I'm also glad to see that the proposal here preserves the ADA accessible parking spaces and actually adds 4 in the lot, so that those who do need to park right next to the retailers are not losing access to those particular designated spaces. As a staff report made clear, there is not a dearth of parking in the downtown area. There are hundreds of empty parking spots, even at peak times, as we just heard. And frankly, living downtown and walking around here all the time, I see evidence of that every day. I think that if the 40 parking spots are eliminated, I think that maybe this would all be forgotten pretty quickly, much in the same way that it is a distant memory that people could once drive and park on Dog Street. But what I really want to focus on is how much of an opportunity this green space really is. It is an opportunity for families and friends, whether locals or tourists, to come together. A common space for sitting, lunching, splashing around, and gathering for special events. There is a lot of potential in this proposal. I have heard criticism in the past that, oh, but this could only be used for a few months out of the year and focusing on like the splash pad. And yeah, that's really great, and a lot of families really support that. But my response to the idea of like this wouldn't be used year-round is, says who, right? As we just heard, the consideration of moving the ice skating rink is phenomenal, and I absolutely support that because the ice skating rink is wonderful, but it is a little cramped there on Dog Street. And we all know that Dog Street is certainly bustling in the fall months all the way through the new year. So why can't this space be an integral part of the loveliness of the fall and holiday seasons that attract so many people to Williamsburg during the holiday times? Why can't there be programming and burning baskets and an outdoor fire pit and hot cider and hot chocolate stands to bring people down to this space even when it's not hot outside? I think, those are just things off the top of my head that I thought of, but these specific ideas and points, that's not really my point. My point is that with vision and open-mindedness, this space could bring a lot of joy and pride of place, which in turn breeds investment in a community by those who live and work here. If we give up and sort of concede that as a community that the current 40 parking spaces is the best that we can do, particularly in an area that's a stone's throw from other parking spots and a parking garage, then I think that's a disappointment. And in my view, it's a failure to be able to harness the potential and visualize what's really possible here, which is to create something new and vibrant for all the people who live and visit here. Thanks.
Thank you. My next speaker card is John Millar.
Good afternoon. I'm John Millar. I live at 710 South Henry Street, so with my long legs, that's about 6 minutes walk from the so-called plaza. In the long run, Colonial Williamsburg can probably do whatever they want with their property, and they have made some doozies of mistakes over the years in which we residents have to bear the consequences. I realize that this commission may have no input about spending money, but I would like to place this comment on the record anyway. As a taxpayer, I am 100% opposed to any public money being made available to be spent on the development of this so-called plaza. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Okay. Our next speaker is Reggie Atkinson.
I'm Reggie Akdoğan, owner of the Precious Gem in the Merchant Square. My business has been over there over 30 years. Parking was the biggest problem in the Colonial Williamsburg when I started the business late 1980. Now, it's rather than getting good, situation is moving to the worse. Every retail business, most important part of the business is the parking and the convenience. Obviously, this parking and the convenience is going to disappear when they close this section. Every time they have the special function and the entertainment in this square, I have to close my back door with the loud noises and then the screaming children running around. And I keep the long time record in this function business, how much business I make in these days. Every time I look at my record, it shows 0. They are not beneficial to the business. The reason is people cannot stand, my customer cannot stand the noise. Another thing is the special function comes in, it takes 3 days for them to prepare their thing. First, they set up. Second, they open the business. Third, they clean up is absolutely mess. It takes, like, I have to call them several times to clean the pewee, smell like a crap. And especially when these roads are closed, you look at the South Henry Street, North Henry Street, and then the Trellis food truck, Cisco, US Food, park, in front of the street, and people get stuck in the one side, and they get stuck on the other side, and I don't know, everything looks good on the paper, and it's not to me. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Okay, so our next speaker is Bryant.
My name is Dot Bryant. I live at 4985 Hickory Signpost Road, which is James City County, but I consider myself a Williamsburg resident. I've been here since 1957. Anyway, I really feel that these 30 or however many parking spaces in this lot are more important to the year-round residents than they are to these hopeful people who are going to come and go into this pretty place. I don't think that's going to materialize. I think it should be left alone where it is, where that people who want to come to the events at the Kimball and to restaurants and to shop year-round need those parking spaces. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is, we have a lot of speakers to get through. We're not going to get through a lot of that. Rusty Bryant.
My name is Rusty Bryant. My business is R. Bryant Limited at 429 Duke of Gloucester Street. I've been a merchant on Merchant Square. This is my 48th year. And back in 1972, I went to my first Merchant Square Association meeting, and guess what the topic was? Parking. It was a problem then, and it remains so today in Merchant Square. I would be remiss if I did not make my opinion known in regards to the negative effects the removal of 40 parking spaces would have on my business as well as Merchant Square in general. Over the past several decades, we have seen visitation to Colonial Williamsburg decline, which of course relates to a decline in sales, not only to the foundation, but Merchant Square shops as well. Speaking for our shop, we've managed to make up for a great part of these sales for two reasons. The first reason, our local business has increased greatly. The second reason, Williamsburg has grown also greatly. We've become an upscale retirement community that has attracted affluent seniors from all over the country. These new community members shop, dine, and support our square. They also are dependent on our parking lot, not just for convenience, but many, as we've said, have handicap plates on their vehicles, not to mention employees with handicap disabilities parking in our parking lot. Then we move on to deliveries of our inventories by UPS and FedEx. Many of us take deliveries through our basements when we receive our goods. The drivers park in loading zones behind our shops and bring goods to our basements. We cannot dispose of our inventories and these deliveries on our sales floor. Some of our neighbors are in favor of Goodwin Square. We know the Blue Talon and Trellis partners are behind the Goodwin Square project as it opens up a new food venue for them. And deliveries would not be an inconvenience as they have their own loading dock. We understand their support. It is, however, understood that Colonial Williamsburg owns the parking lot and with the city's blessing can do what it pleases with the lot. We also understand that CW in its renovation plans for the Goodwin building is devoting the top 2 floors for upscale apartments that will be marketed, they will be marketing. I'm sure that the foundation would rather these new apartments overlook a green space rather than a parking lot. All these comments made, the bottom line in our opinion is that taking away our parking would greatly hurt our sales and deter our local customers from shopping on Merchant Square. We at R. Bryant would hate to see the divide between local residents and the foundation grow wider. We need the support of our local customers, and they in turn need a place to park. I would like to thank the commission for allowing me to voice my opinion.
Thank you. The next speaker is Tim Weidman. Our next speaker is Tim Weidman.
My name is Tim Weidman. I live at 4605 Town Creek Drive, and this is sort of a team effort. I'm going to first read something from Bill Geib. Bill Geib has written this. It'll take about 2 minutes for me to read it. He had eye surgery today. That's why he can't stand here and read it. In September 2016, Walker Parking Consultants, who were mentioned earlier, delivered to the City of Williamsburg Planning Commission a parking study. This comprehensive study defined existing parking and identified future options. In the executive summary, there are 8 alternative recommendations listed. Third among them is Block 15, Lot P3, reconfigure to gain 19 spaces. Their recommendation was to increase from 48 to 67 parking spaces at a cost of $201,000. The report identifies the P3 lot as a hot spot, and in the many charts and pictographs, it is demonstrated in red as an 85 to 100% occupancy. Later in the report, it is further refined. Weekly off-street parking is 89% occupancy, and weekend occupancy is 96%. In an 8-hour shopping cycle that reasonably turns over 1,100 cars a day, if the time limits are properly enforced, or over 400,000 vehicle visits a year. No astute business person would ever fail to protect that kind of customer visits. And that doesn't count evenings going to dinners in the restaurants. In the user survey portion of the report, Walker Consultants say respondents identified proximity to destination as the most important factor in deciding where to park. The report identifies 2 future changes that are expected. The Planning Commission obviously must have informed Walker before they began their study of these proposals. That is Block 15 parking lot demolition and Block 21 museum expansion. Walker Consultants recognized in the report that their recommendation to reconfigure P3 lot, although needed, is not likely to be adopted because of the project, which is now called Goodwin Square Project. The city had identified way before 2016 that P3 lot was to be demolished by 2026. In its study on pages 27, 28, the city has been planning this all along. Somehow it had been decided that this parking lot must go and a park of some kind is to be built in its place. An Economic Development Authority grant has now been made available, and the city wants to proceed with the parking lot demolition. It appears that Colonial Williamsburg, in cooperation with the city, collaborated on the Goodwin Square project. Splash, fountain, trees, big screen, TV, all of that. We have a parking lot study by experts that recommends reconfiguring a hotspot parking lot in contrast with a government agenda that ignores overwhelming resident input against demolishing a popular parking lot in favor of an unpopular park. Through an interview with the Virginia Gazette, Mr. Trivett, the city manager, should be above board and explain to the citizens of the city the clear intentions for this project. We deserve full transparency. Bill Geib. I just want to quickly add to that. Since this became a controversy about, I guess, last December or so, I have talked to owners and managers of virtually every business in the Merchant Square area. The large majority, with only a couple of exceptions, are opposed to this. They much rather have the 40 parking spaces, which will be used year-round, as opposed to a park which is only going to be used on really nice days, and we all know that there really aren't that many of them in Williamsburg. In addition, why hasn't the city considered doing many of these things in Merchant Square itself, or even on Dog Street where we have the Ice Rink in the wintertime? There are seasonal things that could be done to make the whole Merchant Square area much more attractive, more comfortable for people in the heat or in the cold, and we've never seen any proposals for that. That seems it could be done much less expensively, with greater flexibility, and retain these 40 parking spots, which are the most important the best parking spots in the city of Williamsburg. People who park there are generally people who are the ones who are going to afford to buy things in the stores, as opposed to families with children who are going to play there on nice days. We recognize it's critical that Williamsburg do imaginative and unique things to attract more families, people with little kids, all kinds of visitors. We need to get the visitation up, but we feel that this particular project is a waste of money and a waste of a very good parking space. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you especially for... So our next speaker is Mott Robertson.
Hi, I'm Dr. Mott Robertson, originally from Lynchburg, moved down here in 2008, and I am speaking in opposition to the creation of this park. There have been a lot of comments made already that I had on my sheet, so I'm going to just hit some other high points. One is the source of the funding is apparently is supposedly coming from the Tourism Development Fund. I'm not so sure that the Tourism Development Funds are to be used for this type of project, because I don't think that it's going to attract people that come down here to stay in Williamsburg at least for one night. In Senate Bill 942, this statement is in the bill itself. Monies in the fund shall be used solely for the purposes of marketing, advertising, and promoting the historic Triangle area as an overnight tourism destination, with the intent to attract visitors from a sufficient distance as to require an overnight stay of at least one night. Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. I can tell you they will not come, okay? They might come from Toano, they might come from Grove, they probably are not going to take the ferry across, and they're not going to come across to York, and they're not going to come down from Richmond, and they're not going to come up from the Lower Peninsula. Second point, the parking study has already been discussed in great detail, and good points were made. I would just emphasize that in that study, the hot spots were the P2, P3, P4, and P5 parking lots, 314 spaces in those parking lots. There was no recommendation in the study that any lots be closed, but rather how to expand the lots, how to convert the lots, how to improve the lots, and particularly, as been pointed out, how to reorient the parking in P3 to gain another 19 spaces at a cost of $201,000. CW needs to use the parking lots, and I think the city does too, to generate money. And that is another point in the parking study. It was recommended that the city begin a process of beginning to have paid parking. If you go to Charlottesville and go on the downtown mall, there are paid parking lots around there. There's not a lot of free parking. The water feature. It's going to be a health hazard and an injury hazard. Slip and falls will occur, and who is going to be have the insurance policy that's going to cover the suits that may occur? It will happen. Is the water going to be chlorinated? Is there an attendant to watch over this? Who cleans up the trash and the feces that is going to wind up in that pool when little Johnny sits down with a dirty diaper? Does this thing run at night? Think of parents with soggy children wrapped in towels, walking through shops or the streets with a significant distance to find a potty or to get to their car. Just think about that. It's already been nicely pointed out by superb merchants who have come and expressed an opinion about how merchants who sell things are going to be adversely affected by this parking lot closure. The only people it's going to help are the restaurants and the little ice cream store, and that's going to help the ice cream store about 4 months out of the year. Who's going to sit out there and eat ice cream in the middle of December? And as to the water feature again, the library has submitted a request to the TDF Fund Board requesting about $150,000, I believe it is, to enlarge and modify their outdoor bower and seating area where they are the fountain. There are 2 water features there. That could be modified, and that library wants to do this. That could be modified into a splash pad or even maybe a little wading pool. Might be better than the splash pad. And that is money that they have requested from the TDF fund, that Williamsburg, from the monies that it will get. That would be a nice thing for the library to have. What better place to take kids than to the library, and then to have the opportunity to have a picnic or an outdoor event at the library. And you get to look out over the green space there and across in front of the Williamsburg Community Building than you do at the back of the Blue Talon. My God. Places to dine and cool off. You could set up tables with umbrellas on Merchant Square. Merchant Square is big enough to do that. You could use the area on both sides of what I call Upper Dog Street, which is the area across from the bookstore and the Bruton Parish shop, and on the other side, behind where the office that sells tickets is located, and where they have the little vendor's shop when they set up the skating rink.
Your time's expired. Can you conclude or yield
Okay,
the floor for
one
someone
more
else
thing
and
to
come
do.
back at the end?
In selected areas, you can install cooling misters as a way to cool off. Last point is this. There's a new president and CEO that's going to take over Colonial Williamsburg after the 1st of November. There's no rush to do this project now. Let's wait until the new CEO is selected. He or she may have a different vision for CW's way forward and should have the opportunity for review and input. In the meantime, the city could help CW to improve its parking lots and perhaps its restrooms with some of the TDF funds, which they have requested for that. And that will help to attract more people to come and stay, and even possibly stay at the inn or the Colonial House, and maybe have a meal in one of the taverns. I thank you for your time, and I thank you for all the time that you all have put in studying this
Thank you.
fairly complicated project.
Our next speaker is William. Oh, yeah, you tag teamed with Mr. Weidman. Okay, thank you. And thank you for writing down your comments and, safe recovery. Thank you for being here. So then the next person is Tom Hendrickson.
Hello, thanks for the opportunity to speak here. My name is Tom Hendrickson. I live at 3425 Deerlope Trail in Powhatan Crossing. And I'm here to speak in favor of the proposal. My wife and I live here with our 2-year-old son. My wife started jumping up and down when she heard that we could possibly get a splash pad here. We're always looking for ways to get out into the community, meet other families, and beat the heat. This seems to be a way to do all three. Also, this is, I think, for all families, a big draw. And so if you are looking to bring in more young families into downtown, into the Colonial Williamsburg area, this is a way to do it, and not just local families, but I think that this would also be a big draw for tourists, and particularly for a younger generation of tourists that I think we are at risk of losing out on. I know that my wife and I, when we're looking for places to travel, one of the things that we look for is parks, walkable areas where we can take in the local scene. And this is another great opportunity to do all of that. Ultimately, as they say, there is no such thing as free parking, and it feels like the cost of these 40 spaces comes at the cost of a more vibrant and more livable Williamsburg community.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Nina Simone.
Hi, my name is Nina Simone. I live at 210 Matoka Court. I'm speaking this afternoon as a William & Mary alum, as a parent, and as a representative of the PTA over at the Matthew Whaley School. I am an alum of the class of 2003 at William & Mary, which gives my husband and I the unique pleasure of hosting people all year long as they come back to visit. They often come back to visit and they want to go to the cheese shop and they want to go to Merchant Square, but as the years have gone on, they have increased in the size that comes back to visit. There are small children with them, there are families, and I am heavily in favor of this proposal because of what it would do for the families that are coming to visit, who already are invested in this area because of their experience at the college, but now have a little more money and have children that need to run around. Having this plaza would keep people in the Merchant Square area longer. As I said, I'm also a parent. I have 4 children, ages 12, 10, 6, and 4. You might see us because we bike everywhere. We bike from Matoka Court to Matthew Whaley. We bike to the Prince George Street movies. We bike to get ice cream. We bike to shop. If I'm buying a baby shower gift, which I go to baby showers about a third of my time, I think, they come from the carousel. If I buy a wedding gift, which is another third of my time, they come from the Williams-Sonoma in Merchant Square. I am a heavy advocate for this area, and a lot of my peers don't make it down here. They do a lot of their shopping online or at Target or at the outlets, which is why when I go to these public events, I often bring gifts from Merchant Square, label, and I say, look, you can get this here. Having this sort of plaza would keep people down here. It would bring people out of the county into the area. I also represent the Matthew Whaley PTA. The Matthew Whaley is a school just down the street, and hundreds of families are represented in that school. And I'd say twice a month, one to 2 times a month during the school year, there are large events, and then families flow out of that building, and a lot of them flow towards Merchant Square. Some of them do, some of them don't. This would bring families in. This would connect our families in our community with CW in a really powerful way, and that's another reason that I'm an advocate. When friends call me, they say, I'm coming to CW, what should I do? As a parent, to echo the gentleman who spoke before me, I tell them all about CW, but I also emphasize the public library, and I emphasize nearby parks. Well, there aren't any really nearby parks if you're walking, and this creates that space for them as well. So that's important to remember for parents that are visiting. I always say that one of the strongest assets that Colonial Williamsburg has is the city that surrounds it. And one of the strongest assets that the city has is Colonial Williamsburg. And I believe this project creates a beautiful collaboration between the two. Thank you.
Thank you. So that was my last speaker card. So now I'll open up the floor for anyone who wishes to come and speak to the commission. Please come forward and state your name and address.
Good afternoon. My name is Lawrence Langston. I'm at 184 Exmoor Court. Excuse me. I'm here to object to this proposal. Sitting behind me are representatives of Merchant Square. We need to not lose sight of what Merchant Square is. It's a wonderful shopping district with quality merchandise. I've been shopping down here since 1972. I'd hate to see Merchant Square be detrimentally affected. We've already lost bins. I don't know why CW thought that they didn't need bins, and I've not heard who's going to replace bins. There's income being produced by these merchants for CW. Mr. Duncan, I fail to understand where the return on investment is in this plaza. I think you're going to be ruining a good district. I think we need to understand that our CW's purpose is history. And I would offer to them, they need to invest all of their money. They're currently running in the red. They need to put any of their monies back into the investment of the historic district. Leave the entertainment to places like Busch Gardens, Water Country. This community doesn't need a splash pool. It doesn't need green space, as been pointed out before. We have people, the current Merchant Square offers a lot of opportunities for different concepts that have already been discussed. So I urge you to please consider not approving this proposal. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Come forward, please.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Sylvia Tewin. I live at 3312 Summersby Court. My husband and I have been here 6 years. We walk our dog in Colonial Williamsburg quite a lot. We love the area. It's beautiful. I cannot picture what Goodwin Plaza is going to do to bring in tourism. I can't picture that being a call. Are people going to actually say, well, let's go to Colonial Williamsburg so we can go into the splash pool? That makes no sense to me at all. I think the proximity of the splash pool to the shops is really disrespectful to the shop owners, because these kids are going to be running in wet, and there's no reason for this. I just don't see the purpose of the splash pool, besides the attorneys who are in the area who will clearly do very well with all the suits that will follow. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, please.
I'm Michael Thompson. I'm a resident of 103 Sheffield Road in Windsor Forest, which is in James City County. My wife and I have lived in Williamsburg since 2002. The other day, I should say back in March, she was coming out of a meeting at Bruton Parish Church and stepped into the parking lot and fell and broke her foot. Now that's kind of a funny story, but the more funny part about it is that we had to cancel a trip to Florida as a result of that. I think that the money could be better spent, instead of this parking proposal up here or non-parking proposal, could be better spent in improving the atrocious conditions of the Colonial Williamsburg parking lots around here before somebody comes in with a massive suit because of their injuries. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Or yes.
Thank you. My name is Janet Smith. I live on Griffin Avenue. I've been here since 1950, graduating from Matthew Whaley. My husband was born and raised here. We desperately need the parking. Even though we can walk, very few of our friends can walk to downtown. I'm wondering if Colonial Williamsburg has thought to use and make a park out of the area in front of the Wallace Gallery. They've already moved the Wednesday concerts there, and the attendance has increased 3 or 4-fold. It's a beautiful spot. There's parking all around it. To me, that would solve a lot of problems. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Corey Loftheim. I'm at 111 Adams Street. I grew up here and retired a year ago after 39 years with Colonial Williamsburg. A question for you. Has a study been made of incorporating these features into Merchant Square? And if not, why not? And the other question is, with the terminology private plaza, that infers to me that it has a restricted use, or am I misinterpreting that? I feel like Ice Rink has no business close to the historic area. It's an oxymoron for me. You know, I'm in love with Williamsburg. Williamsburg is a unique place. There's nothing like it in the world, and I'm in agreement with some of the comments that hopefully that's what Williamsburg will focus on, its unique character as an amazing museum. There's a lot of green space. Williamsburg is full of green space, but I can see the advantage of some of these family-friendly activities, but why not, again, in Merchant Square or in front of the Wallace Gallery? Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, please, I thought someone else was coming, but they've stopped, so please come forward, Sue.
I'm Sarah Gunn. I live in the Coves. I wasn't planning to speak, but this is bothering me so much that here it is that the money that's being spent is all of our money, and you're supposed to be spending it to get more people to come to town. This is not going to get more people to come to town. It's going to take away from what we have, the enterprise and the income that's coming in from currently from Merchant Square. It takes nothing into consideration. If you're going to take the parking away, where are you going to put the 40 places that was in a convenient area to the stores and the restaurants? But you want to grow by spending the money wisely to get more people in. Well, where are they going to park? So to me, I disregard that whole parking analysis, because parking is tight. You drive around and drive around. I'm not going to park in that parking garage with a homeless person sleeping on one of the steps there. I'm not going to do it. We are used to parking outside, streets, parking lots, we're biting off our nose to spite our face if we do that. That is the most ridiculous thing for the health and well-being of Williamsburg and any kind of commercial activity that you want in the in the center of town. People are just going to drive out to Newtown. There are restaurants out there, there's parking out there. The stores are not as good yet out there, but it's going to happen. We're going to lose all of those people that turn over every day. So it's a foolish way to spend our money. Thank you.
Yes, please come forward.
My name's Susan Barton. I live at 706 Jamestown Road. And listening to what's been said, I raised 3 boys in town. They're now mainly college age, so I can appreciate young families who want a place to take their children. I teach preschool. I appreciate it from that aspect too. I just think this location is completely wrong to take away the parking spots, and that is because I use this parking spot. It's my preferred parking spot to go if I'm going into any of the shops. My mother, who is 90, lives with us. If we can't get close parking, she's not going. So I just think there are plenty of other places, as people have mentioned. My first thought when I heard the proposal was it seemed redundant because we already have Merchant Square. So perhaps including some of these kinds of features there or at the DeWitt Wallace Museum make more sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else want to come forward to speak?
Hello, my name is Kathy Rothschild. I live at number 2 Ensign Spence in Williamsburg. I wasn't going to speak, but I have followed this issue. My husband and I have lived here for 4 years, and we love Colonial Williamsburg. We come down here almost every day. But what Colonial Williamsburg needs is it needs money, and it needs tourists to bring the money. And I can clue you in, if you think that that is going to bring you the money and the tourists you need, you are simply kidding yourselves. And what an earlier speaker said, that they should wait until the new president or whoever's coming in to hopefully shape this place up, I think that he or she ought to have something to say about this. If Colonial Williamsburg has got a lot of extra money on their hands that they don't know what to do with, then what you need to do is you need to repave all the other parking lots, because if you have a baby stroller like I do with my grandchildren, or you have a wheelchair, you literally cannot navigate those parking lots. They are full of potholes, and in the wintertime, there are like 5 to 6 parking spaces together that are completely iced over because they're in such terrible shape. And I would like to know, why can't the city council, I mean, I know you're not the city council, but why can't the planning commission make Colonial Williamsburg fix these parking lots? They're a disaster. And if you want to plow something up, then plow up Merchant Square. You can't put cars there anyway, and nobody's parking there. And if you want some more green space, then plow it up and plant some grass. That'd be a whole lot cheaper than this operation. And the other thing that I wanted to ask too is that I learned just a couple of weeks ago by reading the local newspaper that the mayor of Williamsburg recused himself from a vote because he's on the payroll of Colonial Williamsburg. And I could hardly believe my eyes that the mayor is being paid full-time by Colonial Williamsburg. And I would like to ask, as a citizen, and for the sake of transparency, I would like to ask, because I'd like to know, each member of this planning commission, are any of you on the payroll of Colonial Williamsburg, the Colonial Williamsburg Foundation, or anything associated with them as an employee or a consultant? You can start.
I don't believe this is a question and answer session.
Well, I mean,
but nobody who is going to be voting on this is on the payroll of Colonial Williamsburg. But this, as Greg was saying, this isn't a question and answer session. But
and since I have a little time left, I also want to ask another question, which I also found surprising and educational today, that the staff of this commission, which are paid for by the taxpayers, have come out in support of this proposal. And I would like to ask the staff representative, how does the staff decide whether they're going to support or oppose a proposal before the commission? Do you take a vote? How many people work for this commission? How many people work as employees of the Planning Commission?
Madam Chairman, I would remind the chair that this is not an opportunity to ask questions of the staff. If the Planning Commission would like the staff to answer the question, Planning Commission can direct the staff to do so. But this is not an opportunity for the staff to engage in that discussion.
Why can't it be?
Because
it's a public meeting.
Those are the proceeding rules, ma'am. So if the chairman would like to move on,
Sounds like there's a lot of things going on here that they don't want the public to know about. Thank you very much.
Chairman, if you would like to ask that question of staff when the public hearing is over, I'm sure the staff would be happy to answer it.
Of course, of course. I think that the forum that we are having right now is a period that we can get your comments. It's not an interactive period, and I think that's where the city attorney is trying to enforce. Please come.
Hello, my name is Melody Loftheim. We live at 111 Adams Street, off Capitol Landing here in Williamsburg City proper. I want to first thank each of you for being on this board and for giving us an opportunity to be heard. I raised 4 children in Williamsburg. They rode their bikes. We all rode our bikes. We picnicked. We didn't need a splash fountain. We found our green space, whether it was the green in front of the palace or the green in front of DeWitt or in a garden somewhere in Colonial Williamsburg. They're all responsible, contributing adults. I am concerned about a liability with a splash fountain. I'm thankful, to my knowledge, we haven't had any accidents at the library fountain space. Maybe I just didn't hear about it, but it is potential. We do have busch gardens in the area. We do have water country in the area that people can buy tickets and go play. And we did that when our children were young. They've been there, done that, and it was great. I appreciate so much being able to park close, and there are so many times that I've driven literally in circles all around the Merchant Square area just trying to find a parking place for 30, 40 minutes. So I'm not sure how this abundance of parking has been validated, because I just don't see it. And that's year round. That's not just a few months in the summer where other people are going to come. I shop at the shops there. I purchase things. I contribute to the tax base by doing that. I bring our friends for meals and shopping down in the Williamsburg area. I'm a big one for local business. There is no possible way that I can support that plaza. I also am very concerned about the wording of private plaza, and I understand because it's on CW property, which is private property, that it can be worded that way. I understand that. But I'm also concerned that it could be charged. So how does that make it open for the public? There could be a price tag put on it and restrictions. I don't see using public funds for a private space. I find that very awkward. As suggested, we have other places. If this kind of plaza were to be created, especially at the DeWitt, there's that vast area of green, and it has worked very well for Wednesday night music. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to come forward and speak?
Excuse me, my name is Ed Kern. I used to live on Indian Springs, but I now live at the Landing because I'm getting old.
We still miss you on Indian Springs, though.
I just have one small point. I agree with the comments about using that money, which is specifically stated shall, and shall in the law means will be done, to bring tourism to Williamsburg. And I also had in my mind the thought that we really should wait for the new CEO of Colonial Williamsburg, who hopefully will have vision and ideas. But then my other thought that came to mind was the new Monticello development that I believe has been approved and is, judging from the landscape there is well underway. That was meant to be and is to be, I believe, a place where neighbors can walk, where neighbors will have space to sit down and rest and relax, a place that will do all the things without impinging upon the historical significance of Colonial Williamsburg, and it's already being created. That's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Anyone else wish to come forward? Okay, seeing no one else who wishes to come forward, or now seeing someone who wishes to come forward, please.
I may went very quickly, one more issue. Hasn't been spoken of. My name is William Geib, and that is the health and safety issue regarding the splash pad. I wrote a letter to the Gazette, to the editor of the Gazette about 3 weeks ago when I discovered the health risks of these health pads. And while I hope that you do not advance this further, but if you do, I hope that you would charge Mr. Duncan and Colonial Williamsburg to do research on the health risks of this pad, because 7 communities have closed these because of severe health risks to the children who have played in these fountains and ended up hospitalized because of diarrhea, bleeding diarrhea, vomiting, and so forth, and also slip-fall injuries as a result of this. And I wish that the mothers who came up here advocating the joy of these splash pads would do a little research and Google this and look at WebMD and realize the risks that are involved with these. They might not be as so enthusiastic, but I wish you would charge them with reporting on this and the safety of these before it went further. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. So does anyone else wish to come forward? Jeff, did you want to come back again, or you're welcome to pass? I think you'll pass. Okay, then I will close the public hearing and open this up to discussion amongst the commissioners. I mean, we were all taking notes, so I think we probably have some questions amongst ourselves and staff before we go forward. Anyone wish to start? Otherwise, I will. I mean, just... Okay, so I guess just a couple of different things that I wanted to say out loud, as well as maybe get some clarification on. First off, the Tourism Development Fund was raised many times, probably 20 times. Since I actually sit on the Tourism Development Fund as the Planning Commission's representative on that fund, I guess I wanted to share that this proposal is the #1 ranked proposal from that fund's deliberations. Nothing has moved forward on that, and given the large attendance here, not trying to encourage extra long meetings for myself next week, but next week, Friday at 10:30, that board will be evaluating this proposal as well, if you wish to participate in that. One of the things that was talked about with regard to the Tourism Development Fund, which I think is erroneous, at least in terms of the presentation, is that the library's proposal in front of that board is not to make a different kind of a water park out front at all. It is to have a temporary stage, sort of something the size of the bookmobile that can be moved around and have a stage platform for them. So it isn't that there's going to be sort of public funding for this, which is going to be duplicative to what is in Merchant Square. With regard to the person who wanted to know where we all work and all those kinds of things, this is actually on public record. Every member of this commission, every year, every member of this commission needs to file a variety of conflict of interest documents, and the city attorney takes very good care of making sure that we are following our rules of what we have conflicts or that we are able to participate in. So I certainly would hope that everyone in the community feels that that is being taken care of well, because it is. And I guess one question I did have that Mrs. Loftheim brought out with regard to this issue of the private plaza, which I think is probably a very carefully, knowing the care that our city attorney puts into these things, carefully developed term and definition of that is that it is not a public park. It is on a private piece of property, and whatever else needs to be defined there. If Colonial Williamsburg wants to, cordon off an area and then charge, that is actually something that does come before our commissions, of the city, and how to do these things. I mean, and so the idea that public monies would be going into a public-private partnership and then it would become a private thing with charging isn't something that can be done autonomously, given all the other restrictions that we have. So those are some comments that and if any of the commission members want to have a discussion on those, happy to have that. And then the final thing is that, as part of Ms. Murphy's charge as our Director of Planning, when we finally get through the many, many subcommittee meetings that we actually get to today to have a public hearing, it is incumbent upon her, as her charge, actually to provide us her guidance. And so the notion that she has approved this is in her charge of providing us the measurement of the rules and regulations and how this stacks up with what is our actually sort of box-in charge dealing with the land use and the uses of land as has already been articulated, not only in the code, as one of the things we approved earlier today, but also in our planning commission and how all those things fit together. So it is not that there is a political perspective taken on the part of the city staff. It is their balance of the ways and means of what we have in front of us and what we should be looking at.
May I just add one point to that?
Please.
The last big Colonial Williamsburg proposal that came before this commission, staff recommended approval, and this commission recommended disapproval by a majority vote. So we don't, they independently look at all of the parameters. We look at them separately. We take that into account. I think all of us respect it, but we don't follow it blindly.
At this point,
I was referring to the Scotland Street change, which was more recent.
So anyway, we're at a point of having commission members have an ability to have discussion and comment. Those were some of my takeaways from the previous hours of open hearing, hour of open hearing. If other people had discussion points from what we've learned or other points that they would like to discuss, happy to hear it.
Let me mention one thing that did not come up. The city, our city manager mentioned, I think at the TDF meeting, that they are working on making some changes to the existing parking, including changing some of the parking on Boundary Street to short term so that there's more turnover so people can get in there. There's proposals to allow business owners in Merchant Square to validate parking so that people can park in the garage for free. People have talked about free and reduced parking for city residents. So there's a lot of dynamics going on. This is not just an all or nothing. Our city staff is working very hard to address the parking issues that would arise if this goes all the way through.
Some typed out notes there, or some of those things. I can't read them from this distance, but.
Right. Well, I think although parking, especially free and convenient parking, is obviously a very, very important and strongly felt issue with everyone. And I also believe that the city's recent parking study that was outlined by Mrs. Murphy concluded that the parking in the downtown is rarely at capacity, and that the conversion of P3 into a private plaza is a possible and desirable project. I do think, however, the foundation should think long and hard about the benefits and dangers of a splash pad. And just a quick internet search of those brought up some significant issues, and I think that the foundation would be well advised to think about that. The proposal is consistent with the current comprehensive plan. It supports the Economic Development Authority's downtown vibrancy plan, in which this type of development or project is encouraged. I think it's a welcome asset to locals, visitors, and will be largely an economic boost to Merchant Square and Prince George Street shops, presenting a pleasant place to linger around and have a coffee, and a great venue for a growing number of downtown events. As an archaeologist, I feel that confident that the Foundation's archaeology department will ensure that the protection and preservation of any material associated with the construction of the plaza that's historical and important will be preserved or protected. I also support the conditions that staff has suggested on the PCR 1915, and with the addition, I think we need to talk about how many times that 3-day consecutive event can go on.
No, thank you. Thank you.
My opinion.
Sure. My takeaway from listening to these points and reading a lot of the emails that have come in is that, and I think this is something that's already been hinted on, is that this is really at the end of the day, it's a decision between prioritizing parking and prioritizing semi-public plaza space. And I think that's what our conversation should focus on, and I think it's also important, yes, that we think about the scale and frequency of temporary events in this space, and I think it comes back to some of the same conversations we had the last time around with a similar proposal, particularly with the video screen. Personally, I value plaza space and public space, and that's where my thinking is coming from. Maybe I'm an exception to the rule, but I've really never been able to find parking in P3, and it's not a lot that I even check. I actually find it very easy and enjoyable to park in the garage, or on the street, or walk frequently now. But anyways, so those are my thoughts on parking. I agree with this idea that it is obviously consistent with our current comprehensive plan, and also consistent with what we are trying to prioritize through our downtown vibrancy plan. I think that this is a really nice way to bring people from across Merchant Square over to Prince George Street, which I like to think of as more of the local downtown. I think this is a nice way to kind of merge those spaces. I think the parking lot's a barrier in some ways. It doesn't promote mobility and ease of access between Prince George Street and Merchant Square.
I think having parks are really important to the community. I think having to decide between parking spaces and the expansion of an attraction to make the attraction more appealing to area residents as well as visitors and enhance the overall experience of a trip to Williamsburg is a challenging decision, but a decision that apparently we're going to have to make. I think back to when parking spaces were on Duke of Gloucester Street and or Prince George Street, and I'm sure there were similar conversations where people said, oh, if we can't park right in front of the store, then we're not going there anymore. And we wound up with a beautiful, magnificent Duke of Gloucester Street. I think Duke of Gloucester Street is clearly a better place now than it was when cars could drive on it and cars could park there easily. The same could be said of Prince George Street. They've restricted the number of parking spaces on Prince George Street, and I think we have a better product for it. And I think with the expansion of the attraction per se, and essentially telling people there's not a parking lot, don't go look for spaces there. There's a slim hope now that you might find a space in P3, and the impression is that you might find one and then you don't, and then you're like, there's no parking. But if you're directed to a spot where there's ample parking, then you're likely to be successful parking there. And I think it makes for a better experience. The expansion of the Duke of Gloucester Street area with this plaza means you're not walking as far to get to the area because the area has expanded to go to the nearer parking area, the parking garage. They are looking at some options on ways to enhance that parking with validation and such, so I think that's a good thing. The splash pad, it does give me some concerns. I don't have all the answers to that. I think the notion of moving the skating rink there is a wonderful idea. I think a skating rink in the middle of Duke of Gloucester Street is an oddity, but I think it would fit very nicely in this plaza. I think it's a plaza where having events that aren't so colonial in nature, like an inflatable movie screen a couple of times a year to do an event, that is in keeping with that area, whereas it would be out of place to have a large inflatable movie screen on Duke of Gloucester Street. I think of communities that have plazas where people just go and gather, and it becomes a central part of the community for visitors and locals together. And that's what I would envision this to be. Do I think the loss of 40 spaces will cost us any visitors coming to Williamsburg? I don't think it's going to cost us visitors coming to Williamsburg. I don't think the people who are thinking about coming to Williamsburg will say, I'm not going there, they lost 40 spaces. I think there might be a plaza and an atmosphere of community that's evolving that might help to make a lasting impression for visitors and people who are thinking about living here, young families to move into the downtown area. And so there are some challenges that we'll have to face with the loss of 40 spaces, but the gain for the long term for our community, I think, is really what we have to ask ourselves. I feel for the businesses, but I think the likelihood of having people gather at the park and linger and visit and shop will be increased because they'll be able to do some window shopping while some of their family members enjoy a meal or an ice cream cone or listen to a concert. I do like the notion of considering some other locations, and I do like the concept of, well, we have a new president coming in, maybe we should see how that plays out. I don't think it's our place to vote on the money side of this with the TDF. I don't think that's under our purview. So we need to dodge that one. So those are my thoughts.
Well, I'll just echo what Justin said. I first started driving, looking for parking in Williamsburg in 1984. So I've looked for parking as an on-campus William & Mary student, an off-campus William & Mary student, an employee of the college, as a tourist, and now as a resident and property owner, and as the owner of a business that has an office in Merchant Square. And I, years ago, found you could go into P3 and circle and circle and circle, and then leave and find a parking space easily, and then come back, and the same people are circling in P3. So my experience, echoing some of the speakers, there are parking spaces if you know where they are. And I believe Mr. Granger and Mr. Rogers have made suggestions about signage and making people aware, and I think the parking study said the same thing. So my experience is very consistent with the parking study.
Sure. Well, I'm very appreciative of everyone for coming and speaking today, especially Bill Guy for coming after eye surgery and speaking not once but twice. I was actually very pleased about the distribution of comments that we heard for and against. It was obvious that there was more strongly sided on the against. I think a large cohort, which we did not hear from today, understandably, would be the tourists, because the tourists aren't necessarily tracking an issue that would come in the future. But we know that these people, when they do come visit the area, tend to stay in Merchant Square in the downtown area for hours. So as it stands now, the P3 parking lot is not necessarily open to them based on the time restrictions. I think what could be much more enticing is a place where they could relax and engage with other activities. Furthermore, I think it's in line with the Downtown Vibrancy Study commissioned by the Economic Development Authority, and that it pulls the pedestrian flow of traffic from the Dog Street Merchant Square area and tries to activate the Prince George Street and even Scotland Street area. So ultimately, I'll be voting in favor for this.
Okay, well, just to keep our day moving forward, we have three distinct items in front of us, and from this discussion that I've heard, I think some of these are easier to tackle than others, and so if we could maybe turn towards looking at them in turn. First off, PCR 1913, which is the adding the definition of a private plaza and the requirement of having a special use permit if you are to add a private plaza, but this is basically a text amendment kind of change. Are there questions or modifications or a motion regarding 1913?
Just think the distinction that private means it will be privately operated, not necessarily for strictly private events, is an important one made earlier.
Text change.
So we have a motion.
I move that we recommend PCR 19-013 to City Council.
I second that motion.
Mr. Granger?
Aye.
Mr. Boswell?
Aye.
Ms. Macbeth?
Aye.
Mr. Edwards?
Aye.
Mr. Schaller?
Aye.
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
So now that category is available, or will be as it moves forward through the committee and council process. And the second item is PCR 1914, the request of Colonial Williamsburg Foundation for a special use permit to remove 40 parking spaces. Is there further discussion or concerns on that piece?
I will say that I appreciate that the plan increases handicap parking by 100%.
Yes, goes from 4 to 8 and still has the drop off. So, and there actually are two different sections of parking, which wasn't seem to be clear in some of the discussions, that there's the loading dock entrance out through the Goodwin area, Goodwin building area that is there now, as well as the other side.
I was glad to hear that the signage would be along the road so that folks don't pull in first before realizing that the lot might be full.
So is there a motion on item 14?
I move that we vote to approve PCR 19-014 as staff recommends.
Second.
Mr. Granger?
Aye.
Mr. Boswell?
Aye.
Ms. Macbeth?
Aye.
Mr. Edwards?
Aye.
Mr. Schaller?
Aye.
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
So with regard to 1915, we have a proposal, 5 bullets of conditions, and I think that there's been some, at least, appetite or discussion on additional items there. The first one deals with the audiovisual entertainment equipment to be temporarily installed for a period of not more than 3 consecutive days, and that it cannot be used for advertising, but that there is no limit on the numbers of times. And I believe that when we saw this last, we came down to a number that was like 25 times, which in broader scope, not that we were curating what the 25 were, but we were thinking that if you take 25 and you take out the summer movies, that leaves basically like 1 a month for all the other months of the year, plus or minus in that. And not that they had to be spread out by the months, just in general terms, and that I can remember myself saying out loud, like, it would be really cool to see like the World Cup with your neighbors on the lawn, that kind of a thing. So, I mean, what those other events would be would flow with the different, items out there. I could see, having it connected to like the ball dropping in New York on New Year's Eve or some, various things. But that's no longer there, a limit. We all, at least those of us who voted for that 9 months ago, whatever it is, I guess, like that provision. I did, however, hear that staff was thinking that a number created, obviously, some burden of keeping track of that, but is it undue burden, or is it something that,
The first thing is you have to know the event's taking place.
Right.
So if there's a tent or something like that that requires permit approval, it's easy to track it.
Right.
But if there's not a tent or some thing that triggers an inspection by staff, it's hard for staff to know every event that's going on in that plaza.
good point.
Could we make it incumbent upon the host of that event to inform the city?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that, I'm not trying to add something that is your duty or the policeman who walks in that area on a regular basis to have it be their duty. I mean, they need to inform us, like, we're gonna use 12 to do movies, and we reserve these, and, oh, we're gonna use a couple here to do this thing. So if it's, can that be, bullet just be modified that this is a softball that's being raised, 25, and that the, that they need to give you a schedule.
So you would want to modify the first bullet point to limit the number of events, including audio and visual equipment, to not more than 25 per year with the approval of city staff.
Correct.
Correct.
I wonder about the total number of days that it would be up more so than the number of events. If we looked at it and said 100, not more than 180 days out of the year could a tent or a projector screen or something like that be up. So less than half the year, and that would encourage them to be diligent about taking down the screen and any tents and things like that. So,
Well, tents would have separate special use permit events, that there's a whole separate use for that. I mean, tenting isn't involved in this procedure. Right, I mean, Carolyn? Yes.
Okay.
So the whole issue of tents and special events, like, food events or, drink tasting events and all those other kind of tent things that happen, that's all done with a separate process. That's not folded into this. This screen process is what's here, so I don't think we should conflate the two pieces. I understand the bigger piece there, but the 3 consecutive days, if we wanted to have something up for the 10 days of the Olympics, how would we deal with that? Just couldn't do it? Or we'd have to pick the best days? The gymnastics was really good this weekend, so.
As it's drafted, you could not do it.
You could not do that, okay.
So if we went with the total number of days throughout the year, that allows them to kind of budget, during this period with the Olympics, it's a longer period of time, or, we want to have a run of It's a Wonderful Life for 3 days, or a movie festival or something. Total number of days is really, I think, more important than the number of events, because they might have an event that only needs the screen up for 1 day, and that's one of their uses that would use 3 days, so to speak.
I think it's a great point. I think the 3 days is day for setup, day for the event, day for takedown. So it makes more sense to then allow them days to choose from a large variety than just 3 being the limit.
So we had 3 days, and then we had 25 different events. So are we saying 75 cumulative days, and that they have to provide the city with a schedule?
That's correct. That's what you...
And I'm trying to make sure, is everyone okay with that?
Okay
I'm
with
okay with that combination. I think 75 days total is plenty. I'd rather not go higher than that.
I think that makes a lot of sense, and you could see that, during, that would, allow some flexibility too, that during the second Sunday event, there could be a screen up for that. But I think it's also important that what staff has already included speaks to some of the criticism we received in the past and some of the discussion we have, which is that it can't be used for advertisement. And I think that was one of our biggest concerns. So I was happy to see that. And I think between the number of day restrictions sort of set up as the 75 throughout the year, plus that no advertisement, I think we're in a really nice spot with restricting it to the way we would like to see it used. And
Am I correct that the no advertising is elsewhere in the city code, isn't it? Yeah, so it's, regardless of what happens here, that's still the, yeah. Okay.
You can't advertise on city rights of way at all, and then there are limitations with respect to signage in the zoning ordinance that would be applicable.
Okay, so my screen has now gone blank on me, of course. But there were 5 dots. I assume they're still there once my computer comes back. Are there any other modifications to these conditions or any additional conditions anyone wants to bring forward?
I think those are good.
And I did just have one query, just to make sure. So with regard to the archaeological statements associated with this project, we don't have to approve any kind of archaeological board thing as we have sometimes do, because it'll all be covered and protected and all that. Okay, cool.
This recommendation is based on the study, and the study recommends they don't think anything is there, but to have someone there doing any excavations to make sure that if they do happen to find something, that there's an archaeologist that can evaluate that and determine whether more steps need to be taken.
Sure, perfect. Okay. Excuse me. Okay, so with that modification to the first condition, is there a motion?
I move that we recommend PCR 19-015 to City Council with the conditions that staff has outlined. The change in condition 1, allowing audiovisual entertainment equipment to be temporarily installed for a period of not more than 75 total days of the year. And the equipment cannot be used for advertising. The others stand as written.
Second.
Mr. Granger? Can I get some clarification on that? Does the motion also mean that the foundation needs to give staff a list of events?
The bullet 1 is the 75 days, and that the foundation needs to provide city staff with a calendar of that usage.
Thank you for updating that.
Mr. Granger?
Aye.
Mr. Boswell?
Aye.
Ms. Macbeth?
Aye.
Mr. Edwards?
Aye.
Mr. Schaller?
Aye.
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. So this brings us to our open forum. If anyone would like to come forward and speak to the commission on any item that is before us, or any item that is under our jurisdiction. People are getting up but moving towards the exit, so unless I hear or see a different motion, then I will close the open forum. There are no other items of business that I know of in front of us. Is there any new business or other items that anyone needs to bring forward to the commission? Okay, we do have another meeting this month. We will have our August Comprehensive Plan Work Session 2 weeks from today in this building, and we will cover chapter, do we know?
I'm trying to revise the chapters we've previously seen, and I may get out an additional new chapter.
Okay.
Depending on staff's time between now and then.
All that is good. Thank you so much. So we'll see what we get in the next 10 days or so with regard to what will actually be on that agenda. And then next month, September 18th, we once again have 4 public hearings. And I encourage everyone to read ahead, but they look fairly straightforward. And with that, if there's nothing else, we're adjourned.
Thank you.